Wagwan everybody! The protagonist of GTA 3, Claude, throughout the story gets betrayed by 4 people or gangs. I'm talking about Catalina, Salvatore Leone along with the whole Leone Mafia, King Courtney, so the boss of the Jamaican Yardies gang, and Donald the Love. You're probably wondering right now why I decided to include him in this list. Well, I've got a few reasons why I want to talk about him too, which you'll find out later in the video. However, even if you'd keep Donald out of the equation, it's still safe to say that Claude is not a very popular guy and clearly isn't considered trustworthy by many. If you group his employers into gangs, so for example Joey, Tony, Luigi and Salvatore count as one employer, Mafia Leone, same with Asuka, Kenji and Ray, which would make up the Yakuza, and for example people like Donald Love or Marty Chunks who do not belong to any gang, they are counted separately. Then, even if we don't consider Love as a traitor, 3 out of 7 of Claude's employers simply set him up, which at first glance seems pretty strange, because Claude was a great hitman. He was basically an invincible killing machine, a one-man army kind of guy that on top of that did not ask any questions, did not seem to have any feelings about his job. He was simply a heartless, ice-cold cat. He'd just come, hear the job, do the job and take the pay. Is there a better definition of a hitman? Well, there is, and we'll talk about why in today's video. We're gonna go through every one of the cases I listed and try to determine what makes Claude so untrustworthy. Let's kick off with Catalina's betrayal at the beginning. Catalina and Claude were an item, and they arrived at Liberty City not long before the events of GTA 3. They got into a partnership with the local cartel, and in the game's intro, we witnessed them robbing a bank. During the getaway, Catalina, out of nowhere, decides to shoot Claude down. Why did she do that though? Killing her boyfriend and her long-serving crime partner? That's totally wild. Well, concerning the first point, most of you probably already know about the theory claiming that it's all because of CJ, who pretended that he loved her back in 1992, just so she kept taking him to rob various places so CJ can pay off Tenpenny. Catalina realized that she was being used, and that made her doubt the existence of real love, or rather that she was not ready to trust another man ever since. Not only that, but she decided to do the same thing to other men as CJ done to her, and the theory is that Claude became a victim of that. I strongly believe in this theory, and therefore the argument that she shouldn't have betrayed Claude because he was her boyfriend is not relevant to me in this case. What is relevant though is what is suggested directly by the game. Catalina claims that Claude is not worthy of working with her, that apparently Claude is not ambitious enough.
Sorry babe, I'm an ambitious girl. You're just small time.
Catalina did not want to continue working with him, therefore he had to be erased. Now that could or could not make sense. If Claude was the same soulless and efficient killer that we see throughout the story of GTA 3 before the events of the game, while he was going around America with Catalina performing multiple robberies, then I don't see how he could be called small time. But if he only turned into a killing machine after the incident in the bank and before was just an ordinary crook, then fair enough. We won't find an answer to that one though, but if we're to follow what the dialogue suggests, the second option makes more sense. In any case, there could have been other reasons for Catalina's decision. See, Catalina had a deal with the Colombian Cartel, and they were planning to sell the newly introduced into the city's black market drug, Spank, whose distribution was extremely profitable. Catalina may have reckoned that she won't need Claude anymore, as she'll have the whole gang covering her back, especially that she very quickly got in close contact with highly ranked Miguel, quickly becoming an important figure within the organization herself. This is especially likely if we assume that Claude was not such a good killer prior to the bank incident. In such a scenario, it would make sense for Catalina to cut Claude off, because she would get to keep all the profits for herself. Other than that, I got another theory, pretty wild one as well. In it, Catalina, being traumatized by CJ, is afraid that Claude actually also wants to only use her and that at some point he's going to cut her off, the same way she wanted to do with him. There's not much more to be said about this though, as we don't know what Claude was like during the 9-year period between GTA San Andreas and GTA 3. But let me know what you think about it. Anyway, let's pose a question. Was Catalina's betrayal of Claude fair? No, obviously not. I mean, betrayals aren't usually fair, are they? They can be reasonable though. And with this one, it's hard to tell whether it was, because there is a lot of variables, and mainly because we don't know what Claude was like before the events of GTA 3. Therefore, this betrayal does not bring us any closer to determining what was wrong with Claude during the event of GTA 3. That's why now we move on to the second betrayal of Claude at the hands of the Leone Mafia. Claude, after escaping the police convoy, the first job he got was for one of the capos of the Leone Mafia, Luigi. Soon, he turned out so useful that he became the personal hitman of the Don Salvatore himself. He helped the Mafia massively in their wars with the cartel and the Triad. And at some point, in a moment in which it would seem that Claude was just about to get generously rewarded for his great contribution, Salvatore sets a trap for him, which he barely escapes thanks to Maria, Salvatore's wife, who fell in love with the main character and warned him about the trap. So Maria says that Salvatore decided to betray Claude because she told him that they were an item, and therefore Sal offered Claude to the cartel.
Listen, Salvatore thinks that we're going behind his back, so he was offering you to the cartel in order to make a deal. I couldn't let him do that. I mean, the worst thing is, it's all my fault because I told him we were an item. Don't ask me why, I don't know.
Now obviously the thing about Claude and Maria being together is the last thing I want to consider here, as there are more interesting and more sensible reasons to talk about. Similarly to Catalina's betrayal, here again there is a well-known theory claiming that Sal betrayed Claude because of CJ betraying Salvatore back in 1992, when CJ pretended that he wanted to work for Salvatore in order to secretly scout the Caligula's casino only to later rob it, causing massive financial losses for Salvatore. This has supposedly made Sal paranoid and less likely to trust the outsiders. That's why he was concerned about Claude. He was afraid that he was going to pull off a similar stunt as CJ's. Sal also knew that the cartel, mainly Catalina, was also going after Claude after he destroyed their ship, which they made into a drug factory, and also presumably because Catalina feared that Claude would want to get revenge on her. Because you know, now that she saw how dangerous Claude has become, she realized what she gave away by backstabbing him, so now she genuinely feared him. Sal knew that if he gave up Claude to the cartel, it would probably not only mean peace with the cartel, but he'd also ask for a big price for Claude. And since he already handled the Triad and had an advantage over the Colombians following the sinking of their boat, Claude was not that essential for him. If you add the fact that he had concerns about him turning out to be two-faced, he decided to give him away. It's also possible that Claude was simply too good. I think that Sal, ever since CJ betrayed him, didn't want his errand boys to be too clever, just to be safe that they're not going to go behind their backs, and so they're easier to control, and also whom Sal could pay a little less than they were worth without them realizing or calling it out. I think that this is shown in GTA Liberty City stories on Tony's example. Sal treated him unfairly after he came back in town in order to humble Tony, and Tony was a dumb muscle, but at the same time very efficient in the field. That was the sort of a hitman Sal was looking for. Perhaps Sal did not see that in Claude. Maybe he sensed that Claude is more ambitious and demanding than Tony, and connecting that with other circumstances that I mentioned already, the decision was to give him up to the cartel. Claude, yet again, for the second time in a row, did not do anything wrong and got betrayed nonetheless. And so far, Claude was loyal, hardworking, was okay, and despite that, he got screwed over twice, very unfortunately. By extreme bad luck, he encountered two people that were traumatized by the same person 9 years prior to the event of GTA 3, and he was a double victim of those traumas. And since then, he became a truly soulless killer that now did not build a bond with anyone, and the same way Catalina doubted love, Claude doubted loyalty. And from that point on, he didn't care who he would backstab, whose business he'd be messing up, he just pursued money or revenge on Catalina, or both. And as much as the two betrayals we already discussed were not Claude's fault and were purely just extreme bad luck, the two remaining cases that I want to talk about are definitely Claude's fault, starting with King Courtney's betrayal. There is no background about it. Courtney just simply messaged Claude that he's got work for him. After a couple of jobs, it turns out that King Courtney also, very similarly to Salvatore, gave Claude up to the cartel by luring him into a trap set up by Catalina. Why did he do that though? Claude was very useful to him. Having such a guy in his organization could give him advantage over his rivals. Well, okay, Catalina surely offered a lot of money, and the Yardies were in league with the cartel, as shown by the missions for Kenji. Cool, that's actually enough to reason this decision, that the Jamaicans had to do whatever the cartel wanted them to do because otherwise they would miss out on the opportunity to be dealing spank alongside with them, or even it could lead to some more serious beef, for which they were simply too weak. But there's more to it in my opinion. It seems to me as if King Courtney noticed that Claude is not being loyal to anyone and therefore feared that at some point he may become a victim of it, meaning that Claude would go work for someone else and would mess up Jamaican's business for that someone. How did Courtney know that Claude was disloyal? He could tell by the fact that Claude agreed to carry out the tasks that he asked him to do. I'm mainly talking about Uzi Rider and Gang Car Roundup. With the first one, Claude is being sent by Courtney to go to Hepburn Heights and make a little drive-by on the Diablos, with whom the Jamaicans had a minor beef and they had to be taught some respect. The thing is, Claude has already worked for the Diablos before, during the Portland section. If Courtney knew about it, he could see that Claude was ready to just straight up betray the Diablos without a moment's hesitation. However, we do not know whether he knew, but the second mission left King Courtney with no doubts whatsoever. He asks Claude to acquire 3 gang cars for him, so Courtney can then use them, probably to pull off some ish disguised as another organization, so the blame for those things would go on the organization they were disguised as. Basically, he was up to no good, especially from the perspective of those other gangs. The cars that Claude was meant to steal were Yakuza Stinger, Mafia Sentinel and Diablo Stallion. The cars are the 3 gangs that Claude used to or worked for still. King Courtney surely done a little research on Claude and he definitely knew with whom he was associated. So the fact that Claude carried out a task without saying a word was a clear sign that he does not put any value on loyalty. Courtney was simply afraid that Claude would also work behind his back at some point, and it actually happened. In GT3, Claude works for Kenji, for whom he mashes up the Jamaicans' drug selling operation, and works for the Jamaicans at the same time. Hell, maybe Courtney even knew about it, in which case his decision to betray Claude is completely understandable. So as we can see, Claude, because he ceased to put any importance on loyalty, earned himself another betrayal. And now it's time for Donald Love. While technically not a betrayal, I have a few points to make about his disappearance. To quickly recall this thread, Claude is being recommended to Donald by Ray Machowski, Yakuza snitch within the police. Claude carries out a series of difficult and important tasks for Donald Love, earning himself quite a reputation in the politician's eyes. And then, suddenly, Love disappears without a word, along with a secret package that Claude helped him acquire. This seems very strange. By reading the design document of GT3 and by connecting a few dots, we know that Love's packages contained the plates that were essential in the counterfeiting operation that he presumably conducted after he left. Considering that such a fraud would probably not go completely smooth, a man like Claude could be crucial in this operation. Claude proved himself to Donald, then why didn't Love take him with him? And in my opinion, it's for the same reason as with Courtney. Love was afraid that Claude would betray him as soon as he'd find someone who offered more money than Donald, and that having such a guy within his ranks guaranteed more risk than it was worth, because Claude could leak some information about Donald to someone who would offer him more money. How did Donald know that Claude is not loyal though? First of all, he was a well-informed politician. For example, he managed to notice that the Yakuza were on tense terms with the Colombians.
I've noticed the Yakuza and the Colombians are far from friends.
Besides, Donald had contact with Ray Machowski, who was working for the Yakuza, and thanks to him, he knew that Claude also worked for the Japanese gang. In his second mission, Donald asks Claude to assassinate Kenji Kasen and make it look as if the cartel done it. Just for the record, Kenji was a guy for whom Claude was working as well, and was a brother of Asuka, for whom Claude also worked. And not only that, but Asuka treated him really well, gave him a hideout, and was always straight with him. Meanwhile, Claude, without any questions, went and carried out the task, betraying the organization, without which he would be left out with no opportunities after the Mafia betrayed him. This was a sign for Donald that okay, he can get Claude to carry out a few more tasks for him, but it's not going to be a long-term business relationship, because Claude, with his complete lack of loyalty, was a time bomb that was likely to cause Donald a lot of trouble by either turning his back on him or by leaking information about him to someone who'd offer more money. So you can see how Claude first, due to extremely bad luck, was turned into a disloyal soulless killer, and then his lack of loyalty caused him to be further betrayed and snubbed by his employers. This makes sense because look at Asuka or Ray for instance. Both of them were always straight with Claude and never betrayed him. But notice that for neither of those two, Claude never messes up business of any gang that he worked or used to work for, or rather any gang that he was on good terms with. Because for Asuka, he only wars the Leones and the Colombians, who both betrayed him before, so he had every right to be mashing them up. For Ray on the other hand, he was also warring the cartel, so Claude didn't give any reason to neither of those two to think that he is disloyal, whilst to Donald and King Courtney, he definitely did. Let me know if you agree with the points I made in this video. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more GTA lore based content. Meanwhile, thank you for watching, respect.